if you have a lackluster bench press, then stop overloading your bench press. And what I mean by that is don't be the person who has a goal of bench pressing 405 and constantly unracking the weight and trying to bring it down to your chest in hopes of preparing yourself for future success. So what does all this mean? Well, what I mean by what I'm saying in the video is, let's say you bench press 365 pounds and you're like, man, I really want to hit 4 plates. And your theory is, well, what if I overload my bench press so I'm prepared for it down the road by doing my goal weight, 405? I mean, that doesn't sound too terrible. It's only 40 pounds away. Couldn't be that bad, right? Well, studies have shown, and actually the study is going to be linked below, so no little keyboard warrior can call me out on my false information. But studies have shown, or rather this study has shown, that people who overload the eccentric of the lift, which is what I've been talking about since the beginning of the video, people who overload the eccentric are actually ruining the mechanics of the lift to make them less efficient than they should be. So think about it in this way. You bench press 365, your goal is 405, go to the gym with your friends and say, hey, I'm gonna hit my top set, and then my secondary movement, I'm gonna do these slow eccentrics with my goal weight. You try to come down, you come down slow, you can't control it, it gets wobbly, it speeds down to your chest. Even though you think you're overloading your bench press for success, you're actually not. And this study proves the case that it does not work in that fashion. They actually say, instead of doing the overloads, you should just work on sub-maximal weight, working on technique, explosiveness, and power to make you a better bench presser, which all of us pretty much commonly do. If you don't, leave a comment below and I'll let you know more about that information. But instead of overloading your lift with an eccentric, I'm here to give you 3 tips on how to fix that mindset and to do things that are going to be more efficient with your setup. So like we mentioned, the overloading eccentric is going to ruin the mechanics of your lift because you're not going to be able to stay true to the integrity of your technique if the weight's too heavy. It's just not possible. 3 things that you can do to make you more efficient would be, first, just do heavy holds. So instead of coming out and coming down super slow to your chest and trying to overload your lift in that sense and ruin the mechanics of your lift, just unrack the weight, hold it, and then start thinking about what the lift is going to be like in the future. I would do this commonly as a competitor. My goal would be to bench 450, 500. I would unrack the weight, have a spotter with me, and hold it for 10 seconds. And within those 10 seconds, I would think about myself lowering the weight to my chest, pausing, hearing the press command, and pressing to completion. That is in the standards of powerlifting. If you're just some other person who wants to get strong in the gym, there's nothing wrong with it. You don't have to think about that pause. But regardless, unrack the weight and then think through the lift and how it's going to look in the future. Because now there's going to be an association with your nervous system and your thoughts that, hey, I've done this before, so I should be able to do it again. And this can happen for any sport, powerlifting, strongman, any kind of goal weight you have. Doing these heavy holds would be helpful tremendously because, like we mentioned, you actually trying to complete the weight is going to ruin the mechanics of the lift. So now let's talk about other ways you can overload your lift and still be successful. The number 2 way to do it is using eccentric hooks. These are not common to see. They're sometimes hard to use. I've used them before in the past and I super duper love them. That's where you unrack the weight and there's hooks, these long hooks with plates loaded on them, and they hook onto clips of the bar. So you unrack the weight and imagine my arms are these clips. They unrack with the weight. They're being held by the bar. So they kind of get wobbly. So that's a little bit of an instability factor, but you can overload the top of your lift. And then as you bench press, these hooks are going to hit the floor. And then what they do is they come down, they tilt because they're built in a weird shape, and they unhook simultaneously off the bar. So you go from having, let's say, 400 pounds on the bar to 300 at some point if you added 100 pounds. This can be a little tricky. The instability is a huge factor, but if you can master this technique and actually find good tools to use, it's very cool to give them a shot. Other issues I've had in the past are if your arm length is a certain amount, maybe the hooks come off a little too early, or maybe you have to let it sit in your chest a little bit more for the hooks to come out later. But the whole idea is to start off with a heavy amount of weight. And then as you bench press and get close to your chest, the weights unhook because they hit the floor and they tilt back. That could be a great way to overload the bottom of the lift. And because it gets lighter at the bottom, you can explode off your chest after the fact. So heavy holds, eccentric hooks, they're both great ways to overload your press. The third one that I think is the most realistic is using a slingshot or a similar type of slingshot equipment for your bench press. That's the strap that goes across your chest. So as you bench, the strap gets tighter, tighter, tighter. The strap stretches, so it's actually going to aid you at the bottom of the lift and help you explode off your chest and accelerate through lockout. The reason why that slingshot is so cool and so important for bench pressers is because they can actually overload their weight on the bar by so much. But when they get to the bottom, the mechanics of the lift have gotten lighter. So now they can stay true to their technique. The slingshot will pull your elbows in and put you in an advantageous position. Some people don't like that. They have a certain type of technique that doesn't, I guess, correspond very well to a slingshot. Like people like to bench super wide with a bulldog grip and they go this way. So a slingshot might not work in that sense. But I think for most people, using a slingshot is a great tool. In fact, a lot of my lifters will use it and they'll lift 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds above their max. But the idea is they're heavy holding a ton of weight. And then as they come down, it's not that weight anymore. It gets lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And it comes off the chest and you have great precision, great technique, great form, and you've overloaded your lift to aid your central nervous system. The reason why overloading your bench press raw doesn't work is I compare it to baseball. And I'm sure people are going to hate this, but those weighted bats that you use to make you think you're more explosive with a lighter bat, they actually, studies have shown, ruin the mechanics of your swing. If the bat's too heavy and you try to swing it, that's not going to truly help your technique when you have a normal bat. Same thing with the bench press. You coming down with raw heavy weight is not going to make you any more explosive or better because of it. You want to overload your lift using certain strategies that are not going to ruin the technique of your bench press, and they're going to make sure you don't get injured. So overloads, eccentric hooks, and my favorite, which is the slingshot, are the top 3 tips I would recommend for you on overloading your bench press to have more success. If you have questions or concerns, leave a comment below, subscribe, like the channel, and we will answer your questions and help you become a better bench presser today.